Hey there, y'all, and welcome to the kitchen. Today's shortcut supper is going to give you big time spring vibes. This is my lemon herb couscous shortcut supper, and it's a delicious, really easy weeknight wonder. So first things first, I always love to tell you this. This is a one-pan plan. That means from start to finish, we're doing everything in this one pan, and that means less dishes for whoever is on dinner duty after dinner dish duty tonight. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to get my chicken and my carrots started. My carrots are actually going to be my main vegetable in my lemon herb couscous. I always like to have something in my meals, even with my protein and my starch, something that's going to add that extra boost of nutritional value, and these carrots are the perfect thing for this time of year. So I'm going to take a little bag of baby carrots, and then I have 2 large chicken breasts, and they're going to be my first 2 things to go in. So I've got a cutting board here, and this is just a metal cutting board. It's as old as the hills. It was my husband's grandmother's cutting board. And I'm going to use it just to make sure that all of my meat preparation happens on this and we're not cross-contaminating. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 very large chicken breasts and I'm going to turn them into 4 pieces of chicken. I like to always do that when I get my chicken from the grocery store. You notice that that was in a separate pouch. I like to separate it out into serving sizes. And for us, a serving size is about 4. And then the boys come home and a serving size is 6 or 8. But in most cases, I usually take out between 2 and 4 breasts. So that way I have the exact amount of chicken I need for a dinner preparation, and I don't have this huge pack and I'm like, I have so much extra chicken, but it's all frozen. What am I going to do with it? So if you know what you're going to use it for, like I know for this meal I need about 4 chicken cutlets. That's exactly why I pulled out these 2 larger breasts. So we're going to take these and we're going to turn them into 4 pieces. So this first one, you're going to notice I'm going to pound them a little bit flat with my hand, and you're going to have to look at the shape of your chicken. Sometimes you have one that's a little more obviously fat on the top and a little bit more thin on the bottom. That way in that case, you want to take your hand and pound it thin, just like I did just now, and I want to make sure it's evenly thick all the way across. So that's what you do when you have one end that's thicker and the other end is extremely more narrow. You get the thickness down of that top layer. So now that that's done, I'm going to cut this into 2 even pieces, and that gives me 2 pieces of this piece of chicken. Now, if you have a larger family, you do the exact same thing, and you would do 4 breasts and make it into 8. This is the same situation. You would just take everything I'm doing, get a little bit bigger dish, and double it. You're going to double your amount of couscous, double your amount of carrots, double your amount of seasonings and chicken, and you've got the same dinner in the same amount of time, roughly. So in this case, this is a different kind of shape of a chicken breast, and these both came in the same pack. But I want to show you this. This is clearly the tender that's already easily noticeable. So what I'm going to do in this case, because that is remarkably large, this is actually going to take my 1 breast and make 3. So I'm going to take that tender off. And in this case, that 1 breast piece that's left behind after I move that tender gives me the same shape of this as this first breast was without that tender. And that's usually just dependent on 2 things. That's depending on the breast itself, the chicken, how the chicken was built, and the butcher. So between the chicken breast and the butcher, that's how you will end up with different kinds of shapes and sizes. If you'd rather do this with a meat mallet, you can do that. You would just put a piece of plastic wrap down and bang with a meat mallet. But I like to use my hand because I can tell when I'm going too far, and it lets me stop just a little ahead. And a push down and out kind of motion is what's really good for that. So I'm going to get this banged out the rest of the way, get my hands cleaned up, and we can move on to getting this stuff in the pan. Okay, so also a tip. If you're doing the shortcut version of this, and you're not wanting to do any kind of shortcut savings like I do, ahead of time at the grocery store, you could always just buy a package of cutlets already in the right shape and size when you know you're going to be making this meal. Those are readily available absolutely everywhere. You can buy chicken cutlets, that's all you're looking for. But in the case of wanting to really get the bang for your buck at the meat counter, I love to buy the big packs of breasts and break them down myself, or like I said, put them in different portion sizes. So in this case, we are ready to cut this last breast. Oh, I washed my hands 2 seconds too soon, but that's what a good fork's for. I'm not going to want to wash those again, so I'm going to turn my chicken breast, cut this bad boy in half, and we're ready to get this guy seasoned. I'll wash my knife in a minute because we're going to need him again. But I want to season this chicken and get it in. So because this is lemon herb chicken, we're going to kind of go that route seasoning our chicken. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my heat to about medium high, and then I'm going to do salt, pepper, garlic powder, which is kind of the holy trinity of seasoning in my kitchen anyway, and a little bit of Italian seasoning. So I just always have these on my counter already. We use them so much. You could also use a blend that you keep on your counter. I learned this from Paula Dean. She keeps salt, pepper, garlic powder mixture on her counter in a container already made. It's equal parts salt and garlic powder. That's 1 tablespoon of salt to 1 tablespoon of garlic powder to 1 teaspoon of pepper, and she keeps that mixed up on her counter all the time. And I love that tip. So I've done that years and years. I also keep my homemade chicken rub that I use, my baked chicken rub. I keep that made and in a container at home too, because I use it on everything. I use it on vegetables, I use it on baked chicken, I use it on turkey when Thanksgiving comes around. This is about half of a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and I'm just going to put it in my hand like that because I always measure in my hand. This tiniest part of your hand is teaspoon, a little bit bigger is tablespoon, kind of like flat if you do your cupping. That's how I use my measuring without actually measuring with a measuring spoon. Then I'm going to take my fingers, and as I sprinkle it, I'm going to rub my fingers together like this to wake up the herbs. And what that does is it just allows the herbs to kind of get their flavor back activated. They've been in that jar a while and they're a little sleepy, so you want to wake them up. Okay, and then I'm going to flip them over, do the herbs on the other side. And I can tell my pan is getting nice and hot. So as soon as I get the seasoning done, I'm going to get a little bit of oil in the bottom of my pan. And we are going to get our chicken started. Now it's really important to remember when you are doing any cooking, but specifically shortcut cooking, if you want your dish to be done in the most effective short amount of time, and if you want your dish to all be finished at the same time and not part of it going and the other part 30 minutes later, you really need to think about how to multitask and how to schedule your plans of what goes when. And so you just always have to think about what comes first. What cooks the longest comes first. So chicken and carrots are going to take the longest. They're going to make their first step into the pan. So in we go with about a tablespoon of avocado oil. I love avocado oil. I have been using it almost consistently as olive oil. That's really just a preference thing. It's super healthy for you, and it's almost as easy to find these days. So if you find some avocado oil, pick that up. I suggest you try it. So I'm going to go in with my chicken, which, like I said, has salt, pepper, and garlic powder. I just did about 10 cracks of fresh black pepper. That makes a huge difference when it's freshly cracked. But if you have just black pepper, about half a teaspoon over the top is all you need. I'm going to put my dish in here. I'm going to rinse off my knife while I'm over here. So I'm ready for the next thing. And before I start chopping my onions, I'm going to get about half of this bag, which is a cup and a half of baby carrots in with my chicken. And they're already a great shape, so having baby carrots is a really good shortcut tip because they cook pretty quickly, even though they're like a root vegetable. Carrots do really well roasted in the oven, steamed in the microwave, But really, when you do something like this in a pan, they get the best of both worlds. They get a little bit of that steam, nice tender middle with a little bit of crusty outside flavor. So in with my carrots, I'm going to shake my pan around a little bit. You can see it's kind of full right now. And we're going to use this first few minutes to crust the bottom side of our chicken. And while that's happening, I'm going to get a little bit more seasoning since I added carrots over the top. I'm going to just get a little bit of garlic powder and salt on my carrots. And then I'm going to cover my pan now that it's been searing for about a minute or so those carrots start to steam a little bit. So that was just a little bit more garlic, a little pinch of salt, and about 10 more cracks of black pepper. Okay. Beautiful. And then I'm going to get my lid on my pan and let this go for about 2 minutes. And then I'll flip my chicken onto the second side and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back and it's time to flip over our chicken. Now our lid has been on for a couple minutes and I just have trapped that steam in there so you can get a good cook on your carrots, especially the ones that are on top. Everything's not totally touching the bottom, but all of the chicken is. You can see in the bottom of the pan, I'm going to bring you in here so you can see it. You can see in the bottom of the pan that there will be some moisture. That's just from the vegetables and the chicken being trapped in there, and the salt makes the moisture kind of release with the heat and liquefies in the bottom of the pan, which really starts to make some yummy, yummy flavor in there. So now I'm going to flip my chicken, and we always say it, but I have to remind you, our goal is brown food, because the saying is brown food tastes good, and that's what we're looking for. So if I show you a perfectly brown chicken breast, you know it's time to flip it over. So we're going to flip this to the second side. And every single piece is that good brown color because we didn't mess with it once we put it in the pan. My pan was hot and ready to get this stuff in here. Really, really hot pans are ready to receive this meat and they sear it the best. If you have a pan that's not quite up to temperature yet, you're going to get a steamed piece of meat, which makes no crust and a really rubbery interior. So you don't want to do that. Be patient and wait for your pan to get hot enough. And really, really remember, do not put that lid on until you are sure that there is a crust under there. Just take that first piece of chicken that you put in, peek at it, make sure it's got a good crust. At least minute and a half before that would happen. And that only happens in a minute and a half if your pan is as hot as it actually needs to be. The oil, when it goes in, you'll notice a rippling, and that's a good sign that it's hot enough. So I turn these over. I'm going to get them to where my carrots are kind of touching the pan more. A few of my carrots have that browning on them as well. They're starting to get tender. But the ones that were touching the bottom do have a little bit of that browning, and they are looking absolutely delicious. So I'm going to return my lid, and while that's going for another 2 more minutes, we're going to get the ingredients for our couscous started. So like I said, this is all going to happen in this dish. So after 2 more minutes on this side, I'm going to remove my chicken from the pan, and we're going to build our couscous in here. So that means all the good herbs and yummy bits from searing our chicken and carrots are going to give their flavor to the couscous. And that's how you build flavor in no time that actually tastes like a slow cooked meal. So I have a very large onion here. What I really need is about a cup of diced onions. And I've said it many times before, especially when I teach shortcut suppers, I tell you, if you do not like to chop onions, you don't have to. Onions in the freezer section are a winner. With me, I use them a lot. But oftentimes, you know what, I'm so fast at this point, I just keep regular onions. But this is a giant onion. I'm going to use about half. Half of this onion is going to be a cup of onions. If you want to use onions out of the freezer section that are chopped in the bag, use a cup, measure it out of the bag. Usually that's about half of a bag because 1 onion is what's in that freezer section bag of onions. So, that being said, this is going to be our flavor base that's going to go into our couscous to really amp up that slow cooked flavor in almost no time at all. So I'm going to take my onion and I'm going to break this big daddy down Take my other half I'm not using, put him over here for later. And I take my top and I cut my top and my bottom off. And I know, excuse me, I know we've talked about it so many times, but I also like to talk about it every time I do it because sometimes you never know where somebody's going to start in the lessons. You take the top and the bottom off, and then the top and most of the skins that have the boo-boos. If you have 2 or 3 skin levels with a boo-boo, that's okay. Just take them off. If it gets excessive, just cut off the section that has a bad place and use the rest of the onion. So I've got my onion here. It was one layer that came off. We're going to go through the onion. If you're looking like this, my hand is going to go one chop where it's in front of my fingers, and then I'll put my fingers in the front of the onion, and I'm going to pass back through in between my fingers. After that, I'm going to turn it this way. It would have been cut horizontally. I'm going to turn my fingers curled under this way, and we're going to go through vertically just like this. I'm going to look at my chicken. It's covered, and that's good. Shake it around, make sure it's doing good things, and it is. Okay, so let's do our onion just like I just said. So I've got it halved. I'm going to go through the first time like this, cut that first piece, and once it's halfway through, I'm going to put my fingers right here. And then we're just going to go through all the way between my fingers, watching what I'm doing. Nothing that makes more people nervous than cutting without watching. You don't want to do that. Okay, so turn it this way, fingers under, and we're going to pass back through this way. Just remember, your best friend when you are chopping is a sharp knife. It sounds crazy, but the sharper the knife, the better off you are. Okay, we flipped that forward to give it a flat edge to lay on. And we're going to pass through one more time, and we're good. All right, so there's about half an onion, which is about a cup in this case. My chicken is smelling and sounding amazing, so I'm going to look at it. That sounds so good. When you hear that noise, you know good things are happening. And I'm going to look at the second side. I want it to have all the color of the first side. It mostly will be cooked through. There's a good chance that any of your smaller pieces will be completely cooked through, but it isn't necessary for it to be totally cooked. See, that second side is browned just like the first. It isn't totally necessary for that second side to be cooked as long, or for the interior to be cooked all the way through, because we are going to return this back to the pan at the end to finish cooking with our couscous. All right, so our pieces of chicken came out. Our carrots have some beautiful browning on them, some even caramelization on some pieces. Let me tell you, when you see that on a delicious carrot, you know it's not going to be one of the things that kids are going to complain about. That's deliciousness right there. Okay, so in with my carrots, I want to put another tablespoon or so of oil. And the reason that I'm doing that is because the recipe for the couscous on the box, because when you're doing shortcut suppers, you want to get shortcut pre-seasoned ingredients. So my couscous is flavored already. It's a roasted garlic couscous. It calls for oil or butter, so I'm going to put in about another tablespoon of oil. That'll help cook my onions as well as give the fat needed for the recipe. And really the recipes that have starches like that and they call for fat, that's to get separation between the kernels and a rich flavor in your mouth. So really what that does is it keeps it from being really sticky and gives you just a little bit of individuality to each grain of couscous, or in the same thing when you do it with rice. When rice is really good and individually cooked, nice even grains, it's because you've used a good amount of fat in there. Okay, so we went in with the onion. Now, this is lemon herb couscous. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to stir my onion around. As we always talk about, we're going to season every layer. My carrots have a little seasoning on them, but my onions need a little attention. So my onions are going to get some salt, pepper, and garlic powder, because what do we do that doesn't? Pretty much nothing. And like I said, this is a this is a lemon herb couscous recipe. But this is already a roasted garlic seasoned couscous. So I'm just going to bump up the already good flavor that's in there. So first things first, I'm going to take my couscous out of the box. I'm going to put get some garlic because I know I was talking and I can't remember if I did, but a little bit extra never hurt. I did garlic, salt, and pepper. Okay, so I'm going to get my couscous in with my vegetables. Give this one more spin around the pan just because I want to make sure everybody's coated and happy. Oh, get back here, buddy. Okay. You want your onions to go ahead and have a little bit of translucency to them before you put in your couscous, because couscous cooks in 6 minutes. So you don't want to have to be waiting on your onions to get tender enough. So in this case, I'm going to give my onions another couple of minutes and we're going to go on for the next part of the prep. Once your couscous gets in here, you're going to put about 1.25 cups of liquid. Now, I've had this particular couscous before. It lacks in flavor for my preference. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of vegetable base to this recipe. Vegetable base, chicken base, beef base, and it's always the organic that I buy, is something that's in your bouillon aisle. And it gives everything that you use it in a slow cooked flavor. So when you see people that cook things in restaurants and you're like, how do they get that flavor? Oh my gosh, it tastes like grandma's in here. Beef base, chicken base, bouillon. Those are helpers to get you more flavor in your short cooked recipes to make them taste slow cooked. Honest to goodness though, a lot of those recipes are slow cooked and they have even better flavor because they still use this anyway. So I'm going to go in with about a tablespoon of this bouillon, and that's just going to turn my water that I'm going to add into my pan later basically into broth. So instead of adding a flavorless liquid, I'm basically adding chicken stock. So without adding chicken, that was a tablespoon of vegetable base into my pan. And here's the thing about that too. When you use those bouillons and beef base and chicken base and those kind of things, 1 tablespoon it makes 1 cup of stock, and that will really end up saving you money in the long run, because that tablespoon making a cup of stock is a lot less pricey than actually buying a cup of stock. But if you can make your own stock, go for that. I am going to use the packet that came in the couscous. That's the couscous seasoning. And here we go with our couscous at this point. Now I'm going to let my couscous go in here for about 60 seconds before I add the liquid. And remember, this is an already seasoned couscous. We are toasting this at this point to wake up those seasonings that came in the seasoning packet, as well as give a little nutty flavor to the outside of our couscous. So we're going to just stir that around. And you don't want to leave any kind of rice or couscous that are toasting in fat and butter, because it can go and get away from you really quickly before you know it. Okay, so we're going to let that sit, and while that sits for a second, we're going to get our lemon started. Now, I said lemon herb couscous. Our herbs that have been in our chicken were the Italian herb mix that you can get in the grocery store, but my basil is going to be my finishing herb for my couscous, as well as the juice of a lemon. So basically what I'm going to do for my basil is I'm going to just strip it off, and some of my bigger pieces I'm going to chiffonade that, but my tiny ones my tiny little leaves are just going to get kind of plucked into my dish in the end. Okay, it's been about a minute, so I'm going to measure my water, and all I need is 1.25 cups of liquid here. One. And you're going to be so shocked how great the flavor of this couscous is, just because we toasted it for a minute. Okay, so that goes for all my liquid that I need. I'm going to stir this. Okay. And I'm going to get my chicken in. Right over the top. Now this is going to cook on medium-low for a few more minutes, and then after that I'm going to squeeze my lemon over my couscous. Whoopsie, we want those juices, let them get in there. A little bit got overboard, but most of them got into the pan. I'm going to finish this with my lemon juice and my basil after all is said and done. So this goes for about 6 minutes on the low, and then we're going to finish with our herbs and lemon juice. I'll see you back in just a minute. Okay, it's time to finish up our lemon herb chicken and couscous, and it looks delicious. First of all, once my couscous came back to a simmer and that lid was on, I immediately removed it from the heat. It's just like instant rice. You don't want to leave it on the heat. Once it comes to a simmer, you're done. And it has to just sit for 6 minutes after that. So now I'm going to remove my lid. Oh, it smells amazing. Okay, so the first thing I want to do to serve this, I'm going to take my chicken out one more time, put it on my plate. You notice I left it here because I don't want to go chasing it down again. And we're just going to add our finishing touches to our couscous right here in the pan. I love doing this in a dish that I would be happy putting straight onto the table. But if you wanted to, you could just put this into like a serving platter. Couscous down first once it gets all finished up, and then chicken laid on top of it. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my lemon and I'm going to cut it in half, and we're going to use about a half of this lemon's juice. A tablespoon, maybe 2, is all you really need. This is a very large lemon. You don't want so much that it drowns the flavor of everything else. You just want enough to wake it up and make it super fresh. And these larger basil leaves, I am going to chiffonade. That means we're going to roll them over and just go through and cut into little ribbons. And we're going to stir that in. You notice I left some on my counter because after this is all stirred in, I'd still want to have some to tear over to the top. Oh my goodness. Delicious. Now, this is going to be absolutely piping hot, but we're going to taste this anyway. I'm going to take one for the team. You could put the chicken back on top of this couscous and land it right on the table like this. I'm going to show you what it looks like in the pan before I put it on a plate. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, let's plate this up. This is just how I would serve it if we were having it for dinner tonight. That may be a bigger plate than I needed, but it's okay. All right, a little bit of couscous. And my carrots mixed in there just mean it got all of the flavor in the bottom of that pan while everything was cooking. And then I'm going to just nestle a piece of chicken on the side. Find me a good mama piece. And then at the very end, I like to take a lemon wedge. And this is all aesthetics. You could even put a few lemon wedges in the pan as you serve it on the table. That's super impressive. I like to put a lemon wedge and a few more basil leaves just on the plate, torn around there, or maybe tucked into my couscous here and there. That's really pretty. All right, and who said shortcut could not be impressive? Isn't that yummy looking? I'm going to get a fork and give it a taste. We never want to serve something we haven't tasted, and that is the perks of being the cook of the house. Guys, the depth of flavor in that couscous in the short amount of time is unbelievable. But it's because we layered every bit of this meal in one pan. And that's how you get that yummy, yummy depth. Like it's been on the stove for 3 hours, but it hasn't. Okay, y'all. This might be what's for dinner in your kitchen tonight, but it's for lunch in mine right now. See you next time, and happy cooking, y'all.